races. Here, the Stars and Stripes team has asked for and been granted a lay day, a day off. It's a rest the Americans richly deserve. For the past 3 days, they have mastered their opponents and the elements to take a commanding 3-0 lead in the best-of-7 final. While the Australians of Kookaburra 3 continue to search for the keys to victory, the men of Stars and Stripes are just one win away from bringing the America's Cup back home today, Tuesday, February the 3rd, 1987.
From NBC News, this is Today from Fremantle, Australia, with Bryant Gumbel and Jane Pauley.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on a Tuesday morning, day 2 of our Australian journey. And we have moved our location a little bit from Perth, about 12 miles upstream, on to Fremantle. Unless you fear we have traveled all night and should be bleary-eyed, let's tell you that if you're looking for some kind of relativity to how far we've traveled, it's about the distance if you're an East Coaster from New York to Newark, or maybe if you're on the West Coast, maybe moving from Santa Monica to Long Beach. Not very bad. But again, we have found a truly great location. As we were on Friday, we are in the fishing boat harbor of Fremantle, chief port on the coast of Western Australia, and site of this year's America's Cup races. As noted, this was a day off for both crews, but both have been out practicing, and not long ago, Stars and Stripes returned from practice. We should note that the Australians have proven truly gracious hosts for this event, packing the shoreline daily and cheering both finalists as they move in and out of port on race day. In just a few moments, we're going to be talking about the competition here that has seen Stars and Stripes move into a commanding 3-0 lead. We'll be joined by a couple of the competitors. Tactician of Stars and Stripes, Tom Whidden, will be joining us shortly, as will the helmsman of Kookaburra 3, Iain Murray. Jane?
Fremantle was a boom town 100 years ago when gold was discovered north of here. And like Fremantle, gold is enjoying a comeback. We'll take you up to a famous Australian gold town named Kalgoorlie. And like ours, Australia is an immigrant nation, but until 1972, it was whites only. Well, some people want to go back. We'll get into that hot topic here in just a few minutes. A little bit later, we'll show you how the doctor makes house calls in the outback by airplane.
We will also, this lay day, this day off, we are joined by two of the primary competitors. Joining us, Tom Whidden, who is tactician on Stars and Stripes, and of course, Iain Murray, who's the main man on Kookaburra 3. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Why'd you call a lay day, Tom? I mean, generally, when a fighter's got somebody groggy on the ropes, don't they try to finish him?
Well, Brian, we still have a lot of respect for the Kooks, Iain and Peter, and we realize that if we don't get our condition, that we could have a lot of trouble. And as you saw out there today, it was pretty light air. And in fact, the doctor's sea breeze only filled in the last hour. So we've been glad all day we're not out there slugging it out.
If they hadn't called one, would you have?
Well, the conditions were right for us, and we were set to sail. But, you know, it would have been... We anticipated they were going to call one because of the conditions, but it would have been hard for us to go out 3 days on the lose, and it's nice to have a break and at their expense.
What have been the decisive factors so far, gentlemen? I mean, 3-0 sounds terribly dominant. Is it as lopsided as it sounds?
Well, Brian, my opinion is that you probably haven't seen how good the Kooks are so far. I think that they have a tremendous amount of ability, and we've had a few good breaks in the first 3 races, particularly in the first 2 races. First race, as you remember, we went off the left side and got almost a 40-degree shift in our favor. The second race, we went off the left side and got a 10-degree shift in our favor. So you could say that maybe we knew what we were doing, but between you and I, you'd have to have some good breaks, and it does seem like...
And secondly, you might be wondering what a kookaburra is. Well, it is a bird that is unique to Australia. It is actually a kingfisher, of which there are 2 types. There's one that's called the laughing jackass of the eastern states, and the other one's the blue-winged kookaburra of the north and the west. And yes, they do laugh in chorus. It's a way they use in marking out territory. That learned, we're going to press ahead on this Tuesday morning. When we come back, Jimmy Buffett's going to join us. There is seamanship, there's conditioning, technology, and also psychological warfare. The Stars and Stripes team is employing an unusual weapon in that battle. You're hearing him. Singer-songwriter Jimmy Buffett.
Expanding the view of the captain and crew like a man just released from indenture. As a dreamer of dreams and a traveling man, I have chalked up many a mile. Read dozens of books about heroes and crooks. Yeah, I learned much from both of their style. Son of a son, son of a son, son of a son of a sailor, son of a gun, load the last one step ahead of the tailor. I'm a son of a son, son of a son.
Along with Jimmy, we've got a great location here in Fremantle. I'm here with Jane Pauley. I'm Bryant Gumbel. Fremantle's just up the river a little bit from Perth, which is where we were on Monday. And yes, we do know it's wintertime back home, and you do have our empathy along with that. But we thought maybe a break from the winter doldrums might be just what you needed, and it is summertime here. We're going to be talking from Fremantle with Jimmy Buffett. He'll be joining us, and we'll also be talking about something Jimmy knows a little bit about. That's gambling. It is a passion here, which we'll see. Jane?
And there's gold. There was a gold rush here about 100 years ago, and they didn't find it all. In fact, there's a current resurgence of gold in this country. Could become the world's second largest gold producer if that continues. In a few moments, we're going to take you to the heart of gold country here in Western Australia, to a gold town called Kalgoorlie.
Let's move on up to New York right now and get the half-hour. Kalgoorlie. Like home, it seems. And it's true. You can get a Big Mac in Perth, drive a Ford, and watch The Cosby Show. But there are some things here you just won't see back in the good old USA. For openers, the natives drive on the wrong side of the road here. It must be wrong because there are signs telling you what's right. Once you've got that down, you can pick up liquor without ever leaving your car at what's called a drive-in bottle shop. You can't drive up to a phone, but 30 cents Australian, which is about a quarter in America, will get you a local call that can last all day. Oh yes, instead of signs for deer crossings, you'll find these for kangaroos. Even though the cliched image of a country teeming with kangaroos isn't exactly true, you can find them. In fact, if you're a golfer, you may sometimes have to take on a whole family of kangaroos for the right of way. One final note, since car and kangaroo collisions are sometimes unavoidable, you see lots of these here. They're called rhubars, designed to make sure that you and your car can survive an unexpected encounter.
Just a little hype that goes along. Now, here's a man who needs no hype at all. This is Frank Ellis. You're practically a regular on the show.
Frank Ellis, yeah.
Frank is, like I said, just like this over here. John Grant over here.
How are we doing so far?
So far, we're ahead of the game.
Time, right?
All we need to do is get a new guy to do the interview.
Yeah.
But anyway, John, you've been on the show almost more than Bryant this time, haven't you?
Well, I've had some fun on the show.
You are fairly well put together, my friend. Now, a guy like me, could I lose some weight operating this equipment, and exactly what does the grinder do?
Well, the grinder on the boat, is a guy that's responsible for trimming the sails, when you're just sailing, in the racing mode. He helps with the sail changes, hoisting sails, and just general cleanup on the boat. Is sort of the guys with the strong back and not too much upstairs.
That's my group. I think you've then broke the code.
I know you fit. That's why we're here together.
Typecasting again.
Right,
now,
no problem.
This thing actually doesn't move around like a pussycat.
No.
You have to, and you don't do this for 4 hours or 5 hours while the...
We do this for about 40 minutes, while you're training, for the guys that are training. And the idea behind this, it gives you a quantitative indication of what you're doing. That is to say, it just generates watts, which is a measure, of work.
Right.
And what you try to do, depending what kind of training, is to establish, some workload or work level, and then maintain that for a period of time.
Thanks a lot, John. You're going to get me on this so I can maybe lose a little weight and actually...
I'm going to get you on that so I can watch you go to sleep when you're over.
The Australians said they would pay $500 if you put me on the next trip tomorrow. Okay?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. Okay, I want you to meet Frank Ellis.
Good evening. How are
Thank you, Frank. Okay, we don't want to kill this interview. Frank's got my kind of...
A pivotal part in the development of this country, and today correspondent Heidi Schulman is here to tell us how.
Jane, if the lure of gold is irresistible to you, then the place to be in Western Australia is Kalgoorlie. A gold rush there at the end of the last century created the town in the bush, and the rush isn't over yet. They call it the Golden Mile, one of the richest gold fields in the world. And with the price of gold back up after plummeting in the 70s, the mines are reopened and the rush is on again to get it out of the ground. It was 1893 when Patrick Hannon unearthed the first nugget here, and by the turn of the century, Kalgoorlie was booming. Camels hauled in timber and prospectors flocked to the town's 93 hotels and 9 breweries. The old hotels still stand, and today Kalgoorlie is betting the gold that built them will last forever, which the mayor claims it will.
There are no indications at all that the ore zones on the Golden Mile will ever cut out. That is a statement that has been made and confirmed by one of the foremost mining engineers in Australia.
That's rather astonishing.
It is astonishing, isn't it?
A lot of people in Kalgoorlie believe that. Walk into the Lone Hand prospector shop and they'll sell you some gear, show you some gold, maybe even get you hooked.
It's only a little one. I mean, we buy and sell stuff like this on a daily basis. There's heaps of guys out there, but they're not going to tell you where they're working, are they? Just behind you on there is a photograph of a 30-ounce a friend of mine picked up just before Christmas. Now, he just bought a house down the road with that.
If you find a nugget, you're a professional. You've only got to find one. Your heart will go like that. That's great.
You're hooked.
Yeah, sure. If the first one you find is a little one, you go back to work Monday morning. If the first one you find is a 10 ounce, that's 6 grand, you won't go back to work Monday morning, will you?
Some people don't. Brian Irwin and the Sagers brothers have been prospecting for gold for 8 years.
It doesn't mean to say there's gold laying around on the ground. There's got to be a few pieces sitting out on top somewhere here. You got to find them.
The Sagers have staked a claim to a square mile of bush, and sooner or later, they're determined to turn over every inch of it, searching for the beep on their metal detectors, which means gold.
I suppose it's the old case of gold fever. A lot of times we've gone broke, just start from scratch again. Might be able to retire next week, you never know.
A lot of people think walking around with a detector is easy. I think it's just walking around. I'll tell you what, after about 6 or 8 hours, it gets hard. You get sore back, sore neck, sore arms. You get sore feet from going kicking the dirt. You wear boots out.
And what am I listening for?
For a solid noise.
Oh, it's like a beeping noise.
Yeah. See the difference?
Yeah. You know, at some level, this seems like a very unscientific way to do this.
Unscientific? This is modern-day prospecting.
You sometimes go weeks without finding anything like this, right?
I have gone up to 3 months without finding a piece.
How do you maintain your patience?
It's very hard, I'll tell you. Patience and a lot of beer.
They claim they find at least enough gold just lying around out here to live on, and this is where they want to live.
Oh, I like it out here. Be your own boss, do your own thing. If I got $1 million worth of gold today, I'd still be out here next week.
You would?
Yeah, I like doing it. I'd do it a bit easier, that's all.
Gold diggers like Irwin make Kalgoorlie a free-spirited sort of town. A town where they drink to their earnings or gamble them on a friendly two-up game in the bush.
50 or 100 the trial.
Houses of prostitution operate openly, and even the mayor says...
The madams have a high reputation. There is tolerance on the part of the community. And furthermore, let's not lose sight of the fact that today they also pay taxes.
There is no tax, though, on the profits from gold, at least not yet. So as long as the world is willing to pay a premium for it, Kalgoorlie is a real gold mine. And Jane, this is what it looks like. This is pure Australian gold. These are the newly minted Australian nugget coins.
About how much is that worth?
These are proof sets, and they're selling, dealers asking for them back home about $4,300.
Well, Brian Campbell will make short work of that at the casino, I'm sure. In a moment, we'll have some tips on two-up, which I believe you just mentioned, Heidi, and other sporting propositions here in Australia. But first, a message.
9 out of every 10 Australians like to gamble. And one of the gambles they particularly like is a game called two-up. It is peculiar to Australia. It's a unique game played with 2 coins that can be traced all the way back to the earliest settlers in the outback. When two-up was illegal, the game moved from place to place in the bush, so the police had trouble initially tracing it down. Well, two-up is still in the bush, just outside of Kalgoorlie. You bet your heads or tails, and you win when both coins land heads up or tails up, depending on your call.
I'm a tail better, and sometimes the tails run, and you can win, you know, $60, $70, $80, and other times the heads run, but then it goes one in and one out, and you get used to watching it like that, you know.
Australians love two-up because they think of the fairest game around. It's an even money bet, and stories abound of fortunes won and lost.
A young bloke came out here only about a year or so ago. He only came in here with $20. And he went home with about $8,000 or $9,000 and went out that night for dinner and had all his friends out for dinner and came out the next day and lost the lot.
A somewhat different two-up is played in all 9 of Australia's casinos. The relatively new casino industry here is booming and adding to Australia's reputation as a nation of people willing to gamble. Unlike the United States, the government here sees gambling as a great way to fill the coffers. In fact, lottery started here as far back as World War I. That's why Australia is about the only place you'd find a bookie who's also a member of the city council.
What? Each player straight out?
Straight out.
on 9-3.
We've had to gamble against the elements, gamble against the Aboriginals, and I just think it's, and all the mixture of them makes it that we've sort of, that's our competitive spirit.
That competitive spirit is always high at the racetrack. All Australian gamblers like the horses, it seems, but none more than Albert Jordan. Jordan hosts one of the most popular radio shows on racing every weekend and has taken some time away from us to join us here this morning. And you're going to tell me all about playing two up. Now, I have 2 coins here, but there's no strategy in this game, is there?
Well, you try me. I might float them, what they call float them.
You float them, that means throw them up, right?
Well, throw them up, and then you can make them sort of come down the one, if you're clever.
Oh, you can flutter them, in other words?
Oh, yes.
Really? Now, this is the heads right there, and this is the tails.
Yeah.
But aren't the odds going to be the same? Aren't the odds always 3-1 against my winning?
No, they're even money, because the idea of 2-up is, well, it's as you said, it's an even money chance. We have a lot of grouter bettors with lots of money. They let the fella do 2 pair, and then they come in the 3rd and 4th. And they've made, some of them made fortunes.
Why do Australians love to gamble so much?
Well, we're born under hardships. Take our place. We were born in Kalgoorlie. We had Hessian houses and used to bet on flies crawling up a wall. Our environment was tough. And to be tough, you had to go out and try and get a quid, so you played 2-up and gamble on anything at all.
You win more than you lose these days?
Well, put it this way, I've lost the urge.
Call it.
Up you go. Heads.
Up you go?
Yes, up you go,
Oh, is that the phrase?
Yeah.
You got heads?
Yes. That's what they call ones, you don't lose it.
No, that's what they call I win, you lose.
No, they don't. That's halved.
Mr. Jordan,
well done, Brian.
Tomorrow, if Dennis Conner wins his 4th straight race, it would be only the 2nd time the Cup has changed hands in its 136-year history. Sherry Tripp is founder of the America's Cup Information Center in New York and a Cup historian who knows all about the Cup's less than illustrious past.
Jane, in fact, the original syndicate from the New York Yacht Club didn't know what to do with this bottomless trophy. At one time was suggested melting it down for silver coins for the heirs and successors, but thank goodness it was saved to represent a sporting event with a rich and colorful history. Here, in a recreation of the August 1851 regatta sponsored by the Royal Yacht Squadron, the Yacht America left 17 British boats in its wake. The fledgling New York Yacht Club syndicate primarily had intended to race the boat for wagers, but the race they won that day transformed their gambling urge into global magic. This structure, believe it or not, was the club's original home in Hackensack, New Jersey. Racing was held in the waters around New York City until it moved to Newport, Rhode Island in 1930 in hopes of thinning out the often huge spectator fleets. Practically speaking, the Americans, aka the New York Yacht Club, never had much competition. They always won, and why, you ask? Try sailing a transatlantic weight boat against a Long Island skimmer, as they were called, with the design of your competitor submitted in advance to boot. Even if the competition could not win races, they provided other forms of entertainment. Lieutenant Henn and his wife Henrietta showed up in 1886 with a floating Victorian mansion. It was rumored that the potted ferns given as welcoming gifts helped weigh the boat down. Sir Thomas Lipton, the Tea King, challenged from 1893 to 1930, a total of 5 times. He dubbed the cup the Old Mug and set a standard for what is known today as good sportsmanship. He was a great loser, so much in fact that in 1930, when he was 80 years old, Americans felt that he had to take something home, so they gave him a gold loving cup raised from funds of average Americans during the Depression. The J-Class era, boats with 160-foot high masts and 130 feet on the waterline of the 1930s, brought out some great cup figures. Harold Mike Vanderbilt of the Railroad Dynasty family defended the cup during the 3 series of the 1930s. He added an organization element to cup syndicates that is still used to this day. T.L. Sopwith, the World War I flying ace, had a go at the cup twice with his endeavors. He used his secret weapon, his wife, as the ship's navigator. The Jays were scrapped for war material during World War II, and a long period of cup absence was felt from 1937 until racing resumed with a small but fast class of boat, the 12-meter, the result of a formula, not the size. there would be a total of 8 America's Cup Series between 1958 and 1983. Men like Ted Turner, dubbed the Mouth from the South, would win in 1977 at the helm of Courageous. The French, led by Baron Beek, who challenged 4 times unsuccessfully, was best remembered in Newport for introducing Perrier and getting lost on the racecourse in a fog. The Swedes came with Viking helmets and bicycle winches, but it would be high tech that would give Alan Bond's Australia Syndicate victory in 1983. Australia 2's wing keel created more than just a psychological advantage. It started a whole new computer era for America's Cup technology. On sea and land, the computer specialists compile and analyze everything to do with cup sailing, wind, boat speed, or BMGs as they're called, to the performance of the sails. Computers even cut the sails. The sailmakers are the unsung cup heroes, working long hours into the night. The sails used can make or break an America's Cup race.
We'll see how it turns out. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.
We'll be back after a message.
Town, and now Frio, as it's called, is booming again, flush with the world attention drawn by the America's Cup. And by the time the races are completed, experts say about 300,000 more visitors than usual will have plowed through there to take a look at the competition on Fremantle's high seas. Welcome back on shore. Here with Jane Pauley, I'm Bryant Gumbel. You know, we've been talking about the Cup an awful lot, but not everyone has been enamored of it. I think it was Damon Runyon in his time who suggested that the races should actually be run, just a little bit upstream and heading for Niagara Falls. And around in these parts, there's another T-shirt here, a very popular one that in bold print says, "What Cup?" That's our roundabout way of telling you that in this hour, we're going to deal with some non-cup matters. Jane?
There is a good deal more going on in Australia. We'll discuss the status of women in this country. Are they second-class citizens in a sexist society? Well, a case can be made for that, but things are changing. We'll get into that. A little later in the hour, we'll tell you about the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and we'll show you some of the most remarkable pictures of the yachts taken by a most remarkable female photographer.
We are also going to have a battlefield report from Australia's Great Beer War. Beer drinking is serious business here. We'll talk about that. We'll also meet a young American who just became the first woman to run across Australia, and we'll hear some rock music from a local group known as, you ready for this, the Jam Tarts. Truth. Let's move ahead. Every day, for every single person on this continent, any time of the day, any day of the week, Australians can be found having a cold one. It's noontime on Tuesday in downtown Perth. Office workers have flocked to the City Hotel pub for some lunch, but mostly for some beer. True, there are some diversions to bring the crowd, but mostly it's for the beer.
It's a habit. It's a good habit, though.
It's like this almost all the time in Australia, much to the delight of pub owner Judy McAvoy.
Beer, it's huge. It's the most important thing. It's number one.
Beer is so big here that contests are held to determine the largest beer belly around. The winner of this competition took home 5 cartons of his favorite brew. The competition to be the #1 brewery in Australia is fierce. It's being fought by Swan and Foster's, 2 giants who between them have 90% of the market and who each want more. Peter Bartels of Foster's.
You know, beer's a decision that's made every day. People decide which one they'll drink. They like to drink the winning beer, and we like to keep Foster's winning.
The Swan Brewery is part of Alan Bond's empire. His aggressive influence is certainly felt by the man who runs Swan, Mike Westlink.
He sets the tone, as it were, sets the goals, and we've got to go hard at our targets to make sure that we live up to his expectations.
Going hard includes the use of Sky Channel. It's a service beamed to hotels or pubs, and it features sporting events like this darts tournament. Swan shares satellite equipment costs for those pubs willing to replace opposition brands with Swan.
Foster's, Australian for beer, mate.
The real heavy artillery in Australia's beer war are the television commercials shown here and abroad. Foster's has aligned itself with the whimsy of popular Paul Hogan in this series of spots for the United States.
G'day, typical American beach, sir, son, the kind of scenery that reminds me of home.
Swan has opted for a more nationalistic approach, reminding everyone about winning the America's Cup.
For all of you who made it, this one's made for you.
The commercials and other promotional efforts combine for a saturation of advertising that has some government officials concerned. They reason that greater competition has a direct bearing on greater consumption. David Hawkes of the Alcohol and Drug Authority.
And the evidence is as consumption goes up, so do the problems associated with that consumption. But one would expect that to be reflected in the number of road accidents which implicate alcohol, the sorts of injuries that occur.
In response, the brewery people claim their light beers are much lower in alcoholic content than wine or liquor and urge people to drink responsibly. So in the end, they put the responsibility on the consumer. And even Professor Hawkes doesn't expect Australians to give up their favorite brew.
No one's suggesting that people shouldn't continue to love their beer. It's using beer in moderation. It's not drinking either to excess in a way that endangers your own health or welfare or that of anybody else.
With Australian appetites secured, this country's beer combatants are planning to take their fight to the world stage.
The world's a fairly small place, so we're out there getting as much of the beer market as we can achieve.
We are part of Australia. Wherever Australia's going, we'll be there.
He's up, sport. I haven't finished the commercial yet.
Australia's huge beer consumption is just part of this country's macho image. It is a very male-oriented society here. In just a moment, we'll take a look at how that goes down with women. Right after a break, this is Today from Australia on NBC.
Another dawn in Oklahoma. Another day on the farm. It's pretty quiet around here.
A country where women have had to battle history, prejudice, and, well, even some rather appealing images.
You got a light, buddy? Yeah, sure, kid. There you go. And your wallet.
Nick, give him your wallet.
What for?
He's got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
These Australian exports are hard to resist. Good-looking, in charge of situations, themselves, and women.
The last thing I want is to be a wife out in the bush, having a baby every year.
Or women of grit, independence, and determination.
I want to be a writer. At least I'm going to try.
But these Australian archetypes aren't the whole story.
The men get all the good things without asking, and our union lets us work under the worst conditions. You ought to see the room we work in.
The women's movement in Australia closely parallels our own. The struggle for the vote, equal pay, childcare. But Aussie women have also had their own cultural landscape to cross. Till the 50s, the government officially urged women to have more babies. And women were discouraged from holding jobs by a legal system that, until 1972, allowed employers to pay women only 54% of what men were paid for the same jobs. Joining us this morning, Jocelyn Scott, a lawyer, an author, and a feminist, and journalist Kevin Childs, who has written a book on Australian men's attitudes toward women. And I want to say good morning, good afternoon to both of you. The land where men are men and women are glad of it. Is there truth to that?
Well, it depends what you mean by saying that men are men. I think that in Australia, women are very glad that men are changing and beginning to acknowledge that women do have equal rights and that women are people who have a right to say what they want to, do what they want to, work in whatever jobs they want to.
How much room for improvement was there?
Well, heaps, and there's heaps more. But I think that we are moving at last, and at last there are some men who are doing something to make that move go forward. Not many, but some.
I think this is an important question when you're talking about women, is to ask about men. What's it like to be a man in Australia?
Well, most men, say from the middle class, have bumped up against the women's movement one way or another and tried to either come to terms with it, oppose it, or cope with it. I think a lot are coping with it in various ways, but that all comes down to whether it's career sharing or child minding sharing or the whole lot. But it's changed, but I'm not so sure that the change is permanent.
When we say and think of Australian and say, "G'day, mate," women don't say that, do they?
No, and there's something about mateship that is highly masculine and that in some ways is denigrating to women. It's the idea that men can be mates only if they're together and if women are kept out.
To what degree does that permeate all of Australian society? If it's "G'day, mate," and you're barely included in that in that rather powerful image.
Well, there is very much a pub cult that involves that sort of an attitude, but as we've both said, perhaps we're being the inevitable optimists, but it's changing.
There is a certain well, democracy about what I'm about to say that maybe is the flip side of a man opening a woman's door and so forth. But I'm told of single women at a pub being asked, would you like a drink? Yes, there's the bar. Are women treated disrespectfully here?
Well, women on her own would have a lot of trouble in a lot of bars. I mean, with the pub culture being dominantly male, women, in fact, can't get on that well in pubs. And I'd take up a point, actually, about mates. There are a lot of women, I think, and a lot of men also, who say that they are mates, couples. They, in fact, use the word, if they're together, that the woman or the man in the relationship, they're my best mate. So it's a term that it can be anything from knocking, if you say, thanks, mate, in a sarcastic way, to you're really my mate.
You are, I guess I would say, enlightened. I'm going to bet there are a lot of men in this country who would say you were something else because you are married to a feminist and you are a parent to your children and so forth. How is it to be an enlightened man in this country?
Well, that's a hell of a burden to put on anyone. All I'm trying to do is just cope and really survive, really, and get along. It's a lot of people find it really difficult because you're both sort of trying to pursue careers and that sort of thing, and it brings an enormous amount of tensions. But all I can say is it's a lot better than it was in the old days before one went under what they call reconstruction, whether that was permanent or the reconstructive male. Sounds like plastic surgery,
yes,
but what did I lose? That's the way it is, and I'm not holding myself up as a paragon. I would hate that to think of that, but you just do try to share and just be equal. And there's a better adage, I think, than good day, mate, and it's the old Australian saying of giving a fair go, and giving them a fair go. And this country was, quote, built on that sort of fair go.
For I'm afraid if anybody was taking a stopwatch and measuring equal time, you didn't get it, Jocelyn.
Sorry.
But thank you for being with us. And you as well, Kevin. No, that's perfectly fine. This is Today on NBC. She'll be right.
Camera 2. George, where else are we? Camera 3? Camera 4? Where's that one? Sitting on the dock. Camera 5? Ooh. That's up above. Ooh, that's in the tower. Where's 6? Yeah. Where's 6? There's 6. Looking out into the harbor, and where is 7?
Looking for a beer.
My goodness, 7 is in the harbor. We're having a good time here in Fremantle. We are pressing ahead through day 2 of Today in Australia. After this, we're on to Melbourne and Sydney. She ran here, I'm honest, 3,000 miles. A couple of men have done it in time, but she was the first woman to do it. We're going to talk to her about why she did it and how it felt in this half hour. I would imagine it felt lousy.
She did it because it was faster than walking. When you live in the outback, 100 miles from nowhere, and you get sick, you can't just ring up the doctor. You crank up the two-way radio and call the Royal Flying Doctor Service. We'll show you how it's worked since 1928.
We're also going to introduce you to a British photographer named Cos Evans, who doesn't seem to mind risking her neck to get some unusual shots of the America's Cup competition. And we're going to hear some music from Jane's favorite Australian group, the Jam Tarts. Let's get to the news desk right now, where once again, we must say we do miss you, John Palmer.
I thank you, Brian.
If you get a good picture, it's worth it at the end of the day, really.
Tell me about the first time you did it.
Well, the first time was a bit of a joke. I was with the last America's Cup, working with the British then, and I was on board Victory, and I was saying, God, I want to get a different angle, and I can't think where to go. And I looked up, and I said, well, that sounds a good idea to go up the mast. And the guys laughed and said, oh, you won't go up the mast. And so they were all staring me, so I had a go, and it was pretty scary because we were heeled over at the time, and we went on the outside of the shroud, and with the pitching of the boat, you ended up sort of getting stuck round the shroud. So I was stuck halfway, and everybody was laughing down below. Meanwhile, I was in agony, and but eventually I managed to untie myself and got to the top, and that was the beginning of the end. And ever since, I've been doing quite a few of these pictures.
Well, it must be worth it. Did you get pretty good shots?
Yes, yeah, very unusual shots. You could get the spinnaker peel, and you can get other boats in shot, and it's just a different angle, really.
Having said that, now that we've got you at the top of the mast, is that the most dangerous thing you do, climbing?
No, other things I've done as well, with powerboats, swimming in the water and getting a powerboat coming straight for you. and then trying to pass just very close to you so that obviously it doesn't run you over, but trying to get a new angle on the whole thing. And I usually have to swim with a flag so they actually can see where you are. So you feel a right twit walking down the pontoon with this flag, but you get some good pictures as a result.
Do you find that the more experience you have, the older you get, if you will, the more daring you become?
No, I think I'm getting more chicken in my old age, yes, definitely. I've been doing a few masks.
She and her entire crew arrived on the day after Christmas, right on schedule. You didn't run all the way over here to join us, though, did you?
I did, Brian, I did.
How you doing, Sarah?
Doing really well. Love it here.
First question is a real obvious one. Why did an American choose to come down to Australia and fight hunger when we've still got a lot of problems on home shores?
Well, since I'd visited Australia before, I wanted to get over here and tie it in with the America's Cup. I wanted to do the challenge, the run of the Nullarbor, and so I was able to bring together corporate sponsors here in Australia and back home in North Carolina to make everything work. And it was really exciting. I wanted to put it together as a project, the Across Down Under run.
That's twice we've talked about Nullarbor. I mean, why don't you tell us what this plain is like?
Well, Brian, it's really the longest, straightest road in the world, and it's full of kangaroos and trucks. And it's about 1,000 miles of nothing, and it's just a desert. It's all desert, and all you see is this road ahead of you.
Was that the worst part of the trip?
It was actually the most boring, but it was really hot. There were flies. There was a lot of heat and a lot of headwinds to deal with, and a lot of wild animals. And
I did my math as I got this, and I was trying to figure out, okay, 3,000 miles, 96 days. It works out to roughly about 34, 36 miles a day,
That's right,
okay.
right. Mm-hmm.
What kind of a toll does that take on your body?
Well, your hamstrings just get really tight, and you have to ice down and massage every 20 Ks. And my crew did some really good work, and I was able to pull everything together, just keep running, because you're heading for Perth, and that
What
was
about the sheer
exciting to
toll
get
on
here.
the bottom of your feet? I mean, blisters. I mean,
Yeah, you try to prevent any kind of injury, and I didn't suffer any kind of injury at all because we were very preventative about, tightness of your muscles and everything.
How many pair of shoes you go through?
I went through about 7 pairs.
Is the worst part
And
breaking in a new pair?
The worst part was running through the rain at the beginning of the run, but yeah, the shoes, it becomes habitual. You just mechanically run, and you get your 60 Ks in for the day, and you get up in the morning and do it again.
What kind of a diet did you keep during this?
Basically, it's mostly carbohydrates.
Please tell me pizza and things like that.
Yeah, there were no McDonald's out there, no. Just a lot of carbohydrates, and we had to accept donations of food. We ran out of gas money, but when it looked like we were really halfway across Australia, sponsors came through, and people were donating food to us along the way.
Yeah.
Kangaroo stew and stuff like that.
How is kangaroo stew?
Oh, it was rough.
It was different. Yeah, we're going to talk about food later in the week. But real quick, you've been away from home now since when? April?
Yeah, it's been about 6 months, Brian.
What do you miss?
Since we've been here. I don't miss anything.
Oh, come
just
on,
exciting.
you must miss something.
The pace here is good, and the things I miss, I guess, family and friends.
Yeah.
That's definitely the top.
Well, I hope they're glad to see you. You're going home in what, about 2 weeks?
About 2 weeks.
Taking a plane.
They'll send back right
yeah,
to you.
That'd be nice. don't run all the way. Sarah, thank you. We're going to come back in just a moment, right after a station break. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks,
There are 2 flying doctors stationed at Meekatharra. Emergency medicine is only part of their practice. More than half their time is devoted to routine clinics at the local hospital and remote outposts.
We've done screening programs which has encompassed the whole population of the area, about 4,000 to 5,000 people, where we go out on the plane with a team of people, say, screening for the eye disease, trachoma. That's one thing that we do every year, and we try to cover as many of the population as possible on these clinics.
While the doctor remains the backbone of the service, much of the in-flight care is administered by nurses, called sisters here in Australia.
It's not like you've got a whole hospital to call on. You've only got a very small area to work in, and that you're on your own. There's on your own apart from the fact that you can contact a doctor by radio, but you are basically on your own caring for the patient.
The 31 RFDS planes log about 4 million miles a year, and not always under ideal conditions.
Probably our biggest concern in the West is the summertime period of thunderstorm activity, where the weather can become extremely turbulent, extremely rough. We can get very heavy rainfall, and it can make navigation to some of the outlying areas very difficult, where there are no navigational aids available to us. which can be quite demanding at times. Yes.
Copy that, Ben. Affirmative. Thanks very much.
Costs $17 million a year to keep the Royal Flying Doctor Service in the air. The cost picked up by federal, state, and donations. The patients pay nothing. We'll be back in a moment with a little Australian rock and roll, the Jam Tarts, after a message.
Buonasera, Signorina, buonasera. It is time to say goodnight to Napoli. Although it's hard for us to whisper buonasera with that old moon above the Mediterranean Sea. In the morning, Signorina, we'll go walking where the mountains of the sun come into sight. And by the little jewelry shop we'll stop and linger while I buy a wedding ring for your finger. In the meantime, let me tell you that I love you. Buonasera, Signorina, kiss me goodnight. Buonasera, Signorina, kiss me goodnight. Ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Doobly-dooly-lap-da-ba-rap-dee-da. Buonasera, Signorina, buonasera. It is time to say goodnight to Napoli. Though it's hard for us to whisper buonasera. That old moon above the Mediterranean Sea. In the morning, Signorina, we'll go walking where the mountains of the sun come into sight. And by the little jewelry shop we'll stop and linger while I buy a wedding ring for your finger. In the meantime, let me tell you that I love you. Hey, buonasera! Signorina, kiss me goodnight. By the little jewelry shop we'll stop and linger while I buy a wedding ring for your finger. In the meantime, let me tell you that I love you. Buonasera, Signorina, kiss me goodnight. Buonasera, Signorina, kiss me goodnight. Buonasera, Signorina, kiss me goodnight.
And on that note, we are going to say goodbye to the west coast of Australia. We've got an all-night flight ahead of us. What is it, about 2,400 miles east?
I think we were discussing, give or take, it's 2,000, give or take 500.
We're going to be flying all night. We'll greet you tomorrow from Melbourne. We're going to spend an awful lot of time there talking about the problems of the Aborigines here. We're going to take you to the place where Crocodile Dundee was filmed. Greg Norman is going to spend some time with us. We're also going to take you to the smallest of the Australian states, Tasmania. We hope you'll be with us. Safe travels. Thanks for being